Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We're back with some more gameplay, this time featuring the brand new 40k precons. And I can confirm, every single person involved in this video was extremely excited to play. So let's hop right into it, see who's playing what and what opening hands they kept. First up is Matt on Abaddon the Despoiler. This Grixis deck is pretty chaotic, and it plans on abusing Abaddon's ability to try and cascade into some powerful spells. Matt keeps an opening hand of 2 mountains, an island, Exotic Orchard, Herald of Slaanesh, Bloodthirster, and Mortarion, Daemon Primarch. Up next, commanding the Tyrannid Swarm, is Dustin on the Swarmlord. This teamer deck focuses on 2 major synergies, Tyrannids and +1/+1 counters. And thankfully, having the Swarmlord as your commander, you get a little card advantage too. Dustin keeps an opening hand of Evolving Wilds, Command Tower, Soul Ring, Herald's Horn, Hormagaunt Horde, a Talon Jackal, and Deathleaper, Terror Weapon. Up next for the Emperor is Chandler playing Inquisitor Greyfax. This Esper deck is very token focused, and then when Greyfax drops, it'll buff all those tokens and you can also investigate with her. Chandler keeps an opening hand of a Plains, a Swamp, Arcane Sanctum, Arcane Signet, Birth of the Imperium, Assault Intercessor, and Vanguard Suppressor. And last but not least, we have Cody, leading the reanimating armies of the Silent King. This mono black deck is all about artifacts and graveyards, as Necrons should be. Cody keeps an opening hand of 2 Swamps, a Soul Ring, Mystic Forge, Defile, Go for the Throat, and Flayed One. We're about to hop right into the gameplay, but before we do, let us know who you think is going to win down in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to check all our links down in the description. We've got deck lists, a link to our second channel where you can find our podcast, our Patreon, and our social media links. We've also got 2 affiliate links, and our first is Dragon Shield, so if you're looking for any high quality deck boxes, playmats, or sleeves, be sure to check out that link. And if you're looking to make your own custom playmats and gaming gear, be sure to check out our other affiliate link, Inked Gaming. By the way, while we were playing this game, we had the actual 40k models with us while we were doing it, and they are beautifully painted by our friend from Black Crown Arts. We're actually going to be giving away a Greyfax and a Swarmlord painted by him, so if you're interested, stick around to the end. But that is enough talk for now, guys. I'm super excited to see how this game turns out, so let's hop right into it. And before we start, like in true 40k fashion, you have to roll some d6s. So we do it to see who goes first, and Cody wins with a 4. And he'll start off with a Swamp, into a Soul Ring, into a Mask of Memory. The turn is then passed to Matt, who just plays Sunken Hollow and passes to Dustin. Dustin will play Command Tower into Soul Ring, and then he'll pass the turn to Chandler, who will just play Arcane Sanctum and then pass it back to Cody. Cody starts off with a Swamp, and then he'll cast Flayed One, which makes him mill 3 cards when it enters the battlefield. Those cards are 2 Swamps and an Endless Atlas. He then says he's going to equip his Mask of Memory to his Flayed One, but he doesn't actually do it on board, but the table reminds him before his next turn. It's now Matt's turn, and he'll play a Mountain and pass to Dustin. Dustin will cast Herald's Horn on his turn, naming Tyrannid, and I'll announce his upkeep triggers with it if he actually finds something. He'll then play Evolving Wilds and fetch for an island with it. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who plays a Swamp, casts an Arcane Signet, then passes. Cody moves straight to combat and swings for 4 lifelink at Dustin. Upon connecting, Mask of Memory will trigger, and he'll draw 2 and discard Lich Guard. After this, he'll play another Swamp as land for turn, and then he taps for 4 to cast Mystic Forge. The turn is then passed to Matt, who cycles Forgotten Cave on Cody's end step, and then he'll play an Exotic Orchard as land for turn. He'll then cast Herald of Slaanesh, and then pass the turn to Dustin, who will cast Tyrannid Prime, and then pass the turn to Chandler, unfortunately missing a land drop. Chandler plays a Plains as land for turn, and then he'll tap for 4 to cast Inquisitor Greyfax. The turn is then passed to Cody, who will start off with an Unstable Obelisk. After this, he moves to combat, and he swings his 4/1 at Matt, who just takes it. Mask of Memory trigger, he'll draw 2 and discard a Chronomancer. After this, he'll activate Mystic Forge to exile a Swamp off the top of his library. He then casts Cranial Plating off the top of his library, and then he'll pass the turn to Matt, who starts off with a basic island. And then thanks to his Herald, he's able to tap for 4 and cast Bloodthirster. He'll then immediately move to combat and swing for 6 in the air at Cody, and then he'll swing for 2 at Dustin, and Dustin will just block it with his O4. Upon connecting with Cody, Bloodthirster will untap and there'll be an extra combat for it. He'll then swing it at Dustin for 6 this time. It'll untap. At this time he doesn't attack because he wants a 6/6 blocker. I don't blame him. He passes, and Dustin's Herald's Horn reveals Biophagus, which he casts. Evolve trigger, and then he'll pass the turn to Chandler. And Chandler will just cast an Assault Intercessor and then pass the turn to Cody, who stops on his upkeep to activate his Mystic Forge, exiling another Swamp. And then he equips Flayed One with Cranial Plating. Then he unearths his Chronomancer, and then moves to combat and swings an 11-1 lifelink at Matt, who will just take it. Mask of Memory trigger, and he discards Resurrection Orb. Post-combat, Cody will activate his Chronomancer, sacrificing his Unstable Obelisk, and then he'll draw a card. He'll then move to end step, exile his Chronomancer, and then he'll pass the turn to Matt, who starts off by playing a basic swamp, and then he'll tap for 5 to cast Abaddon the Despoiler. He then asks Chandler not to tap down his Bloodthirster because he's only going to be swinging it at Cody and Dustin, and Chandler says sure. Matt will then move to combat, and he'll swing for 6 in the air at Cody, who takes it, extra combat trigger. Then he'll swing 6 at Dustin, extra combat trigger, and then he'll not swing anymore. The turn is then passed to Dustin, who will cast a Malanthrope, and its ETB trigger will target Cody, obviously. Cody only has 1 creature, so it only gets 1 counter from this, and then thanks to Tyranid Prime, evolve triggers all around. And then Dustin also remembers the counter from Biophagus. He'll then cast a Farseek, finding a Cinderglade to the battlefield tapped, and he'll pass to Chandler while searching. Chandler stops him on his end step, and he'll activate Inquisitor Greyfax to tap down Abaddon, and he'll investigate. Then on his turn, he'll pay 2 to crack the clue, drawing a card, and then he'll play Dismal Backwater as land for turn, gaining a life. After this, he'll move to combat, swing for 4 at Cody, and then he'll pass the turn to Cody, who will start his turn off with another basic swamp. And then he'll tap for 6 to cast Their Name is Death. This will destroy all non-artifact creatures. Priority goes around the table, and when it gets to Chandler, he'll activate Greyfax to tap down Flayed One and investigate. The board wipe will then resolve, and Chandler's Assault Intercessor does see Matt and Dustin's 3 creatures each die, so they each lose 6 life. He'll then activate his Mystic Forge again, exiling Hedron Archive, and then he'll just pass the turn to Matt, who starts off with a basic mountain. He'll then cast Exalted Flamer of Tzeentch, and then pass the turn to Dustin. And Dustin plays an Adeline Jackal. He'll then immediately move to combat and swing for 2 at Chandler. Upon connecting, he'll search for a forest to the battlefield tapped, and then he'll pass to Chandler while searching. And Chandler will just start off by tapping for 5 and casting Birth of the Imperium. When it enters the battlefield, he gets to make 3 2/2 Astartes warriors with vigilance. The turn is then just passed to Cody. And Cody finds probably the best card in his deck, Biotransference. He'll then move to combat and swing for 9 lifelink at Dustin, who has to just take it. Mask of Memory trigger, and he discards a Cage Sun. Post-combat, Cody casts Locust Heavy Destroyer, Biotransference trigger, and then when the Destroyer enters the battlefield, everyone has to sacrifice a creature. The turn is then passed to Matt, who knows that if he casts a big creature into this board, Chandler's Saga is just going to make him sacrifice it. So he plays an island and then passes to Dustin. On his upkeep, Dustin's Herald Horn reveals Broodlord, and then he'll cast a Rampant Growth. Matt will respond though by casting Reverberate to find his own basic to the battlefield tapped. They resolve them both at the same time, and Matt will find a swamp and Dustin will find a mountain. The turn is then passed to Chandler. His Saga will tick up after his draw step, and Cody sacrifices his Heavy Destroyer. And then Chandler will play a swamp as land for turn. He'll then tap for 5 mana to cast Primaris Eliminator, giving all of Cody's creatures -2/-2 till end of turn. Finally getting rid of that lifelinker. After Cody has declared the target of that ETB ability, Dustin decides to respond by flashing an Elictor. When it enters, he gets to make another 3/3. After this, Chandler swings for 4 at Cody, and then pass the turn to Cody. Cody stops on end step to activate his Mystic Forge, exiling Polluted Mire. He'll then do it again on upkeep, this time exiling Vault of Whispers. Now in his main phase, he'll cast a Plasmancer from the top of his library, and he gets to search for a swamp to his hand. Biotransference trigger. He'll then play the swamp that he searched for as land for turn, and then he'll cast a Night Scythe, Biotransference trigger, and ETB trigger. The turn is passed to Matt after this, and he decides it's time to drop the Horus Heresy. He'll gain control of Dustin's 3/3 token, one of Chandler's 2/2 with Vigilance, and then Cody's 3/3 flyer. After that, he'll pass the turn to Dustin, who starts off with a basic forest as land for turn. And then he'll tap for 5 mana to drop the Swarmlord. Since this is the first time he's casting him, he'll enter with 2 +1/+1 counters. After this, he'll tap for 3 mana, and he'll cast Hormagaunt Horde, X is equal to 3 thanks to the Horn. And then he'll just pass the turn to Chandler. And on Chandler's upkeep, he's wanting to draw some cards off of his Saga's last trigger, so on his upkeep, he'll flash in Sicarian Infiltrator, and will pay 2 to squad to get a copy of it. He draws 2 cards when they enter the battlefield, and then he'll attempt to resolve his Saga's trigger. Cody will respond though by casting Defile, targeting one of his Infiltrators, so Chandler will draw no cards. He'll then just play a swamp as land for turn, and then will pass to Cody. Cody will also play a swamp as land for turn, and then he'll cast Illuminor Xeris, Biotransference trigger. He then activates Mystic Forge, exiling Beacon of Unrest, and then he crews his Scythe. He also equips the Night Scythe with Cranial Plating. After this, he'll cast the Silent King, and he unfortunately misses a Biotransference trigger. Continuing on, he'll equip his Night Scythe with Mask of Memory, and then he moves to combat. 14 power is turned towards Chandler, and since it is flying, he can't do anything about it. Mask of Memory trigger, and he discards Cryptek. He'll then cast Wayfarer's Bauble, Biotransference trigger, and then he passes the turn to Matt. And after Matt's draw step, the Horus Heresy will tick up and he gets to draw 3 cards. He'll then cycle a Barrenmore, and then we'll tap for 5 mana and cast Blight Grenade, targeting Sarek. When it resolves, the Silent King dies, and then all other creatures get -3/-3 till end of turn. Matt will then cast his own Soul Ring, and then we'll tap for 4 to cast the Ruinous Powers. After this, the turn is passed to Dustin. On his upkeep, Herald's Horn reveals Trigon Prime, which he will also cast. And then just trying to get bodies on the board, he'll cast his Death Leaper. After this, he'll move to combat, and he'll swing his Swarmlord at Cody for 7 commander, who just has to take it. He then attempts to pass the turn to Chandler, who stops him on end step to crack a clue. Then on his turn, he'll play Memorial to Glory, and then just pass the turn. On Cody's upkeep, he'll activate Mystic Forge, exiling Myriad Landscape, and then he'll cast Arcane Signet off the top of his library, Biotransference trigger. He'll then cast Sawtech Immortal off the top of his library, Biotransference trigger again. He also casts Canoptek Scarab Swarm. He initially misses the Biotransference trigger, but Dustin catches it later, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark the life loss. And then when it enters the battlefield, he'll choose to exile Matt's Graveyard, seeing as it has 2 lands in it, so he gets 2 1/1s of flying. After this, Cody will crew his Night Scythe, and then equips the Scythe with the plating and the mask. He'll then move to combat and swings for 17 in the air at Matt. Matt can't do anything about this, and this will put him to 2. Chandler then asks Matt if he stops this, if Matt will owe him a huge favor in the future, and Matt agrees. So Chandler will flash in Grey Knight Paragon, destroying the attacking creature. After this, the turn is then passed to Matt, and on his upkeep, he has a Ruinous Powers trigger. He'll roll for it, and Dustin is the chosen player, and he exiles Bone Sabers. Then, after Matt's draw step, the last ability on Horus Heresy triggers. Everyone chooses a creature. Matt and Dustin both choose the 1/1 flying tokens. Chandler chooses a 2/2 Necron token, and Cody chooses the Swarmlord, and they're all destroyed. And the Swarmlord does trigger off himself, so Dustin will draw a card. Continuing on, Matt will tap for 7 and recast Abaddon, and a tapped Worn Power Stone. He'll then pass the turn to Dustin, who finds an Acolyte Hybrid from Herald's Horn on his upkeep. He'll then play a basic island as land for turn, and then he'll cast the Acolyte Hybrid. He has 1 floating left over from his Soul Ring, and then he'll tap completely out to cast a Broodlord. X is equal to 5. It'll enter with 5 counters, and X was 5 or more, so he draws a card, and then he'll distribute 5 counters amongst his creatures. After this, he'll move to combat, and he'll swing his Trigon Prime at Chandler, and his Hormigaunt Swarm at Cody. Attack triggers, they'll both get a +1/+1 counter, and the Horde can't be blocked. But he forgets to actually put the counter on Trigon Prime, so Chandler only takes 6. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who will start off by casting a Talisman of Progress. He then counts his mana and counts 7, so then he drops Reaver Titan, and then passes the turn to Cody, who on his upkeep will activate Mystic Forge to exile a swamp. And thanks to Biotransference and Mystic Forge, Cody is able to cast Shard of the Nightbringer off the top of his library. It resolves, and Chandler is the target, so he loses half his life, and since it's rounded up, that 1 missed damage from Dustin didn't matter. And Cody gets to gain the 10 life that Chandler lost. Oh yeah, and there was a Biotransference trigger. After this, he equips his 1/1 flyer with Mask of Memory and Cranial Plating. A swing with this flyer could kill either Dustin or Chandler since they're both tapped out, and Cody knows he has to kill one of them. So he moves to combat and swings for 13 in the air at Dustin. He also sends 6 at Matt to chip him down a little bit, and one of them's blocked by Abaddon. Damage then goes through, and Dustin unfortunately dies. Mask of Memory trigger, and Cody discards a Scorpec Destroyer. Cody then moves to his second main phase and casts Go for the Throat on Abaddon. The turn is then passed to Matt, and on his upkeep, Ruinous Powers chooses Chandler, and the exiled card is Thunderhawk Gunship. Matt gladly casts this because it gets him a flying blocker, and then Chandler has to lose 6 life off of this. And he follows it up with a Chaos Terminator Lord. And then Matt will pass the turn to Chandler, who immediately crews his Reaver Titan with his Grey Knight Paragon, and then moves to combat and swings at Cody. Attack trigger, both Cody and Matt take 5 damage, and Cody contemplates blocking with his Shard of the Nightbringer, but he decides to just take the 10. Continuing on Chandler's second main phase, he taps for 8 mana and casts Vanguard Suppressor, squatting it twice, getting him 2 token copies of it. The turn is then passed to Cody, and on his upkeep, he'll activate Mystic Forge again to exile a Darkness. He then cracks his Wayfarer's Bauble for a swamp to give his deck a good old shuffle, and then he'll cast Sculpting Steel from the top of his library, copying the Cranial Plating. Biotransference trigger, and he equips it to his Shard of the Nightbringer. He'll then cast Scepter of Eternal Glory, another bio trigger, and then he moves to combat. He swings both of his beefed up flyers at Matt, and then 3 2/2s at Chandler. Matt is unfortunately dead here no matter what he does, but he will still activate his Thunderhawk gunship to put it in front of the Scarab so it dies. Chandler blocks with 2 of his suppressors and goes to 1. With Matt now gone, it's a 1v1 between Chandler and Cody. Chandler forgets to remove 2 of his suppressors, but you're about to see why that doesn't matter. Cody casts Living Death. This will get him some creatures back from the graveyard that can block the Reaver Titan even if Chandler finds a way to crew it. So all creature cards in graveyards are exiled, then everything on the battlefield is sacrificed, and then everything that was exiled is put onto the battlefield. Let's just say there are a lot of triggers that go in the stack, and since Chandler is not an active player, his will all resolve first. So Chandler will draw a card off of his Infiltrator, and then all of Cody's creatures will get -2/-2 until end of turn from the Eliminator. This will kill 4 of Cody's creatures, and Assault Intercessor will trigger 4 times. Cody's triggers then start to resolve, and he starts with his Flayed one, milling 3 cards. He searches for a swamp to his hand with Plasmamancer, exiles Chandler's graveyard to his Scarab Swarm, but there's no artifacts or lands in there. Chandler sacrifices his Infiltrator to Locust Heavy Destroyer, and then after that, the turn is passed to Chandler, who will play an Exotic Orchard as land for turn. He'll then crew his Reaver Titan and swing for 10 at Cody. Attack trigger will kill him, and that is the game. Chandler and the Imperium are the winner of this week's 40k game. Well everyone, there you have it. That was a really fun game to talk over. I personally was rooting for Chaos, but unfortunately Abaddon never got to pop off. Cody, however, got to absolutely go off with Necrons. I felt like I was watching a game of Arch Enemy. Let us know what you guys thought down in the comments below, and as always, don't forget to check out all our links in the description. If you listen to the beginning of the video, you already know about most of them, but the important one that a lot of you are here for now is the giveaway. As you know and saw during the game, we had some really nicely painted models with us while we were playing, and we're going to be giving away 2 of them. One of them will be the Swarmlord for our first place winner, and our second will be Inquisitor Greyfax for our second place winner. All you gotta do is follow the link down in the description. And just a quick disclaimer, we're only going to be shipping these to addresses in the United States. Sorry everyone else, we do love you though. But that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a smooth day.